everyone, I'm Cynthia Garrett, and welcome back to another session. So joining me on today's session on Skype is Brad Dacus. Now, some of you may know him, some of you may not know him, but in 1997, Brad Dacus founded what is called the Pacific Justice Institute, where he serves as president and defends religious liberties and parental rights. The Pacific Justice Institute, or PJI as we call it, has a network of hundreds of volunteer affiliate attorneys and handles more cases on the west coast of the United States than any other organization of its kind. Brad can be heard weekly on the Dacus Report, which is a weekly radio show on radio stations across the country, and you may have seen him as a guest speaker on numerous radio and television programs because he participates weekly in several radio talk show interviews. He makes appearances on America Live, CBS Evening News, CNN, Dateline NBC, Good Morning America, MSNBC, NBC News, News Talk TV, The Today Show, The O'Reilly Factor, and there's more. I know I'm forgetting some, but suffice it to say that Brad's varied public speaking opportunities also include public debate on 2 occasions against the president of the ACLU, and on another occasion against the president of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. I can't even begin to tell you how impressive his resume is in terms of his background. But what's even more impressive to me, Brad, is the fact that you dedicate your life and your organization to fighting for the religious freedom of not just Christians, but all faiths across America. So,
very
welcome.
true. Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be on the show. I've once heard it said that if we don't defend religious freedom for everyone, we don't defend religious freedom for anyone. And that particularly applies when we're talking about the law, which is to be equally applied to all people and protect all people. So it's great to be on the show. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Thank you, Brad. You know, last week, because we've been on this topic for the last few weeks of sorts, and we heard a bit about how in the UK, there's sort of this unequal application of defending all religious freedom, because now everyone else's religious freedoms are defended, but the rights of Christians are not defended. So from your perspective, if someone of the Muslim faith came to you and wanted to be defended against an attack on their faith, or if someone of the Jewish faith came to you and wanted to be defended against an attack on their faith, would you, and how would you handle that?
Oh, yes, we would. And of course, we want to make sure that it was a real case of someone who had real religious persecution, discrimination, religious harassment. And that would be, of course, the first examination of all of our cases. But if they meet that test, and like, for example, we're dealing with a student in a high school, and the girl wants to wear her religious garment, covering up her head. Schools should reasonably accommodate that because that's their sincerely held religious beliefs. On the other hand, we deal more with attempts to persecute Christians because of their faith, much more than people of the Muslim faith being persecuted. For example, our public schools in the United States, particularly in California, but other states, go out of their way to even indoctrinate into Islam, teaching how to do the different things to say, "Hail be to Allah, Lord of creation," and bow your knee 5 times, as a part of your class curriculum. They'll do that, and at the same time, they won't give any kind of a positive education with regards to the history of Christianity. So it's a double standard. It's widespread, and unfortunately, that's the reality of what we're dealing with in the United States.
Why? I mean, the United States is historically a Christian country. So I don't know. Look, maybe I'm dumb, but I'm very simplistic about this because I travel all over the world. If I go to Saudi Arabia and I'm told to cover up, I'm going to cover up because it's respect. When I'm in Rome, I do as the Romans do. I eat pasta and I speak Italian. When I'm in France, so you understand what I'm saying? Like, why then?
Right.
What is politically correct about giving away your culture?
Yeah, and I understand that too. I think a lot of it is the mindset of people who are not of the Christian faith and have taken on this delusion that somehow if you're tolerant towards people of other faiths, it's good, you're being tolerant. But Christianity is somehow seen as a bully. You want to oppress, you want to fight them. They're the bad guys. They're the ones that are teaching morality that violates their new sexual lifestyle, sexual relationships. And so a lot of secular society no longer sees religion as something of a nice general benefit. Instead, they see it often as a symbol of hatred or a hindrance to the development of culture and society. And it's very dangerous because from that comes intolerance, comes harassment in the workplace, harassment in our public schools, and even harassment directly of churches and religious institutions, which we have some really shocking cases that we're presently involved with right now.
Yeah, I mean, what are some of the attacks on the Orthodox Jewish faith in our public school systems?
Oh, we see this very widespread, particularly on our public universities and campuses, where we see anti-Semitism blatant, and it's often the radical Muslim student clubs and groups that have done this. Like, for example, University of California at Irvine, very respected university, and yet there you had Jewish students who were isolated, screamed at, harassed, simply because they were Jewish.
In Irvine, California?
Yes, and you had these Muslims crowd was so vigilant, so threatening, so challenging that they were actually booted off campus eventually. Had they been another group, they would have booted off campus immediately to scream and threaten people in a way that causes them to have fear, anxiety, to be on a public school university. And UC Irvine is not alone. We see this at university campuses across the country where there's growing bigotry and hostility and anti-Semitism. It's very real. We at Pacific Justice Institute take that very serious, along with the open and growing hostility and intolerance towards silencing people of the Christian faith. Students like Berkeley is a classic example, where if you go to Berkeley and you're open about your Christian faith, we see what happens. We see the persecution, we see the silencing and the chilling effect. And this is happening in other colleges and universities as well. And it's all under the guise of tolerance that they are silencing and being intolerant towards people who have a Christian or biblical worldview that they want to share peacefully and respectfully.
Oh, I mean, it's almost, it's offensive to my intelligence to actually say that I in the guise of tolerance, I don't tolerate you. I mean, it's like, what? What does that go with? But here I have a question for you. Is the church, are Christians in some way to blame for this persecution? Are Jews in some way to blame for this persecution? Have we dropped the ball in some way?
Yeah, I think so. And part of this is through complacency, specifically with not just public universities and what they've become so hostile and no longer the free open marketplace of ideas by any means, quite the opposite now. It's the most intolerant institution in America, but also our public schools. Parents allowing, for example, the teachers union, the NEA, to really take control of local public schools with very extreme agendas that are very hostile towards a Christian biblical worldview and openly and very blatant in promoting sexuality, sexual lifestyles, values, philosophy that is completely opposite from a humanistic, secular humanistic perspective. And it's very chilling on students who don't decide to comport with that from teachers who are zealously pushing that in our public schools. And it's no longer isolated. This is becoming the norm in public schools in many places throughout California, even in the rest of the country. Even our textbooks are rewritten to show open hostility and bigotry towards people with a Christian biblical worldview.
Well, okay, so, how did you get into this work, Brad?
Originally,
we should back up 15 minutes. Like, how the heck did you get into this?
Well, originally I was working for Senator Phil Gramm as a legislative assistant, and originally I was going to become a pastor, go to seminary, And I prayed and sought God on it. The more I did, the stronger and stronger my desire was to go to law school. And I went to the University of Texas School of Law, one of the top 20 in the country. And it was a fantastic, eye-opening experience. And I had a strong desire after interning with an organization there while I was there to defend religious freedom, parents' rights. This was the burden on my heart. And at the time, I'll tell you, back in 1997, I had no idea what we were going to be facing today with the degree and depth of open hostility and confrontation of people simply because of their Christian belief and faith. We have gone a long way from a society in the 80s where we're striving to be a moral society to one now where we're striving to simply just have the freedom to share our faith and live our faith without losing our jobs, without being denied admission into a college or university because of our faith, or being silenced and being criminally prosecuted like we've seen right now that we're defending people simply because they're sharing their faith and preaching their faith in public.
Right.
That was unthinkable back in 97. Now it is cold hard reality. The good news, by God's grace, is we are making progress, so it's definitely not the time to give up.
Listen, I got to tell you, I spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast a while back this year, and one of the things I said was, I had that moment as a Christian when my life was beginning to sort of show me that, I could go all in, and surrender and become a lifestyle Christian, or I could stay on the fringes and probably never really experience the fullness of whatever my calling was. And so, I shared this at one of the prayer breakfast gatherings, a dinner that I spoke at, and I said, it's funny, I had that moment where I looked in the mirror and I said, oh my gosh, how did an otherwise super cool hippie rock star chick become not only a born again Christian, but now I'm a Republican because I have no choice because I can't vote for the things that I used to vote for. And so I'm like that person I was a career Democrat because I believe in trying to be fair and I believe in all these things that are democratic. But see, I don't even think they're democratic. I just think most of us as people believe in trying to be fair and trying to find a way to all get along. But by the same token, there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. And so one of the things that really got me during our last election was that we had churches in California that called themselves blue churches. And I thought, what the heck is a blue church? How could you vote for a candidate that, in my opinion, would have, okay, so Christian, my son is 25 now. I probably, up until about 3 months ago, could have decided that I was ready to terminate my pregnancy and just gotten a gun and shot him in the head and said, I'm done. I don't want to be a mom anymore. I'm aborting you. And it would have been okay. Like, that's how crazy I think we were getting with these issues. Right. And to me, it starts to boil down to, for Christians, if you say you believe what you say you believe, then do it and be it. Because the not doing it and the not being it is really hurting us. And it's hurting people that don't believe because they don't see us really walking in the strength of our conviction.
Right. It's a combination of both conviction and compassion, truth and love. Mm-hmm. And we as Christians, if we're going to be effective, we have to have both. We can't compromise on truth. What God's word says about, for example, the sanctity of human life, the institution of marriage, these are things we cannot compromise without calling God a liar. Right. But at the same token, we have to engage with love and respect for people, because to do that, we deny the love and power that Jesus displayed on the cross. And if we combine those together and we live those out, what I call true Christianity, we can change the world. Many people look at America and Europe and places and they say, oh, this is terrible. These places are they're post-Christian. I look at everything really as pre-Christian, because when we compare, San Francisco and London and other places of the world, we say, oh, these are terrible places. And yet, when we compare that with the early church in Rome, Rome would have made those cities look like a boys' choir. Yeah. And what happened? God changed Rome because the church was faithful in their love, with the love and truth of the gospel and the Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah. And we need to always hold on to that, never, ever, ever give up, just like they never gave up.
Well, it's true, because all people want love. And
That's right.
it's like the old song I used to sing when I was a little girl in Catholic school. They will know we are Christians by our love. By our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. I don't know if you remember, but I sure do.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah,
do.
Sister
I'm old
Margaret
enough,
made us
yes.
sing it every morning. So
Yes.
I'd love to hear about some of your cases, but I want to start with one that you're very well known for, and I want you to kind of speak to this. You were hired by the U.S. government to defend the words "In God We Trust" on our money in America, correct?
Yes, we intervened in the case, and the U.S. government did not object. And it was very key that we did intervene and argue because it was real important that it was defended properly. The U.S. Department of Justice initially was going to contend that "In God We Trust" is like a phrase like "God bless you" when someone sneezes, has no meaning. It's just a phrase, rhetoric. And of course, that's not the case at all. It's a statement of our history and heritage. The acknowledgement of the law, our Creator, and the laws of nature and nature's God. That was the foundation of our Declaration of Independence. The whole concept of fundamental rights are totally derived by the acknowledgement of a Creator and God. And so, to us, it was a statement of history and heritage and truth. And the Ninth Circuit allowed that to be protected. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, groundbreaking case for the protection of truth in terms of religion and history and heritage.
What have been some of your favorite cases, and why were they favorites?
Well, a major case that I really love was one dealing with the rights of parents to homeschool their children. In Europe, unfortunately, we see, like in Germany, just a draconian mindset and philosophy of government oppression of the individual rights of parents and families to be able to homeschool their kids. Well, in the United States, in some states, we have a growing oppression as well. California was one of the worst in the country. We took the case up on appeal, where a court held that parents have no right to homeschool if you're not a credentialed teacher under the government. And they reversed themselves after hearing the case again, after we argued the case. It was a wonderful success for parental rights, which is becoming more and more challenged by zealous leftist extremists who really want the government to have the final say over what's best for children, as opposed to recognizing the fundamental right that parents have been given for the care and upbringing and education of their children.
Your work with parental rights is really impressive to me because, I mean, it's shocking, and anyone who knows me would laugh at this statement, but I wish somebody would try to intervene in my home and tell me how to raise my son that I pushed into the world after 14 hours. I can't even relate. But this my program airs all over the world, and I go a lot to South Africa to speak, and I love the South African people because there's such a hunger, for Christ there. And I often say to people in the West that I think that hunger is there because they have far fewer distractions than we do. Life is more real. Opportunities are harder to come by. And so the power of God, I feel, is so powerful there in countries like that. And so, when you're dealing with these kinds of cases, and you think about other countries, how do you see, other countries compared to ours in terms of Christianity, parental rights, all of it?
Well, it's really incredible when you visit different countries and see that they're very different in their struggles. And I guess lectured in South Korea once a few years ago. I was so impressed with the intensity of commitment of the Christians there in South Korea, particularly with regards to prayer and intercession. Very challenging and humbling for many people in other countries, Christians in other countries. Then I went to Honduras recently, and I got to see, it's a very, third world in practically speaking. And yet the people there who are committed to their faith, living their faith, sharing their faith, was so exemplary to people in countries where it's more developed and they have nice things, and comfortable Christianity is sort of the norm in many of these countries, like in the United States and in Europe. And then I see countries also where there's persecution, where God is just pouring out his spirit in countries like Iran and China and India, And I think that needs to be an exhortation to those of us in other countries where we don't have that same degree of blatant persecution, but instead more of a gradual persecution where we need to really take our faith seriously and live by their example, where Christianity is not a matter of comfort, but it's a matter of who we are and what we live in, not just our lives in terms of our conduct, but also sharing that truth and love to the people around us. Christianity is very simple. It's very basic. It's loving God with all of our heart and who we are, and as a part of that, translating that love into loving other people with the hope and truth of Jesus Christ.
Well said. Well said. You know, you also defend a lot of persecuted Christians who are trying to get asylum in America, correct?
Oh, yes. And now we took this on not because we're seeking another thing to do by any means. What happened was there was this gentleman, he was from Egypt, and he was an evangelist in Egypt. He was sharing the gospel. Well, if you're an evangelical Egyptian, that's the bottom of the barrel. That's even below the Coptics.
Wow.
They're the bottom. And he was tortured, not by the Brotherhood government, but by the existing government. Muslim zealots in Egypt were torturing this man because he wouldn't give the names of other people in his underground church who live and share Jesus Christ.
Wow.
He was eventually let go. He's got the scars on his body to show the torture. He fled to Jordan, where Jordan he found out he was already on the blacklist, if you will. So he got a visa to the United States. We at Pacific Justice Institute defended him when we found out that the other organization that defends immigrants defends only Muslims. They don't defend Christians. No one else was going to bat for him. Another organization called us and says, can you take this on? And no one else would, so we did, and we prevented him from being sent back. This was actually during the Obama administration when this was happening full force. And now since then, we now have people, Christians from Bangladesh, from China, from other parts of the Middle East, where they're suffering persecution and they're needing protection. And to us, the most classical immigrant in need of protection and to be able to stay in the United States or in another safe country are those being persecuted because of their religious faith. That's what this country was founded upon. And I know people in England and other countries around the world can really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Everything that we were founded on in America and, you know, Europe, England, I think about the Western world. It's so crazy to me that we founded ourselves on things that we aren't even applying to ourselves anymore. You know,
right?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and in fact, just not that long ago, the Obama administration brought in over 10,000 refugees from Syria.
Yeah, I remember.
And on the face of it, they say this is great. This is humanitarian. Well, the rest of the story is the fact that about 15% of Syria are Christians, and yet of those 10,000 that were brought here to safety in the United States, only 57 were Christians. And they're the ones that are being killed in the refugee camps that the UN is funding in Syria and in Jordan and other countries. So the atrocity from a worldwide perspective, from the United Nations perspective, is so great. And we're so grateful that the existing president of the United States is calling it out, and hopefully will take some action to directly help assist Christians in the Middle East that are being slaughtered with very little protection from the UN or other entities who seemingly are supposedly supposed to be doing that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. Listen, you guys, we're out of time. We have to go. I'm Cynthia Garrett. Thank you for joining this session. But as you leave, I encourage you to begin to really think about the freedoms that you have to live your faith and to love your God. And this isn't about stepping on anybody else's freedom to do that. It's just about trying to wake you up to the fact that your freedoms to do that are being attacked and taken away. And if not yours personally, your brothers and sisters around the world. So you might even just invest some prayer this week in other people and in this subject, because prayer works. That's what we believe. So I'm Cynthia Garrett. I will see you next week. Hi, everybody. It's me, Cynthia Garrett, and I hope you're enjoying the sessions. And I just wanted to drop in on you and remind you to pick up a copy of my book, Prodigal Daughter, A Journey Home to Identity. I wrote this book because I realized that we are all prodigal kids, you know, and there was a time in my life when I ran off looking for love in all the wrong places and ended up in a world of trouble. But I met my maker and I found my identity in that mess that God turned into a message. So you can go to cynthiagarrett.org and get information about how to get my book online and at booksellers everywhere. I promise it'll bless you.